The heart of our missions is that God will be glorified and the others will know the grace of God who has called us. Learn how God is using the lives of people like you and like me to expand His kingdom. This is Between Brothers.
Lord, thank you for this afternoon. Now, thank you for this day that's been very full, but full of your work and your people. Lord, I pray that you would give us strength and clarity of thought right now to be able to share together about what you have done. Thank you for my brother, for Tom. Thank you for how you are using him and have used him. Thank you for the stories that he joyfully shares with others. And I pray that your Holy Spirit would be here right now to guide our conversation. There's so much that we could talk about, so much we could share. I pray that your will would be done and that your name would be honored and your people would be blessed. I pray it's in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So, your name, full name, where you're from, and where you are right now.
Okay. Sorry, when people ask me where I'm from, it's all over.
All right. Awesome.
Oh, is that okay? I mean, I'll just give the rundown of where I've been.
Sure. The short version.
Okay. All right. My name is Tom Van Gorkom. I was born in California, went to high school in Yakima, Washington, went to college in Longview, Texas, Laterno University. My first job in Houston, went to the mission field, Colombia, South America, for 15 years, then to headquarters in Florida for Wycliffe Bible Translators. Then we moved to Tennessee, and then God called us to Rio Grande.
All right. Okay. So this next question may be hard for you because the question is, if you had to divide your life timeline up into 3 sections, how would you divide it up?
3 sections.
Mm-hmm.
I assume you edit this.
Yeah.
I guess a formation of my abilities, then training both pre-field and on the field. Wow, I don't know how to divide it up.
First thing that comes to mind. This is not
thinking
set
of the
in stone.
spiritual formation, spiritual maturing. There's overlap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get used to where you're at, you learn a lot of cross-cultural things, and then you're learning a lot of spiritual lessons, and God developed more ministry in me. So if I think about it, it was pretty technical, and then it became more ministry-focused as God developed things in me.
And what section of your life would you say you're living in now? You're living in the ministry on the field section of your life.
Yeah, it's a different field, but I'm living in ministry where the technical aspects as well as administrative merges with the spiritual side and ministry.
Interesting. So, you're born in California, but then grew up in, where was it?
Yakima, Washington. Central Washington State.
Yeah. So let's start with the formation period. And you said like beginning there was more technical part. So how would you describe your formation years?
Well, I'm the youngest of 8 children. My oldest brother, 11 years older than me, experimented a lot. He still does. And he taught me how to make electromagnets. I learned how to make little motors out of nails and wood and wire. I started from there. I followed my dad around everywhere. He fixed stuff around the house, cars, appliances, whatever. And I love taking things apart. My mom says when I was 2 years old, she was cleaning out behind the refrigerator, and I asked her how it worked, and she said, I don't know. And I said, then let's take it apart. So yeah, that was the first step of formation, just because I loved getting my hands into it. I spent more time in the garage working on bicycles, lawnmowers, building mini bikes and go-karts, and being the neighborhood mechanic. And then working on cars, I had a little business in high school called, I just said I fix anything from cars to calculators. And then college, the formation, of course, was more formal with engineering and more heavy theory. And then on the job, actually, wow, that's where you really learn. When you get into a professional job and you've got to stay up with the competition and
So did you work before entering ministry? Did you work what we would call a secular job or a job?
Yeah.
What was that?
My first job was with a Halliburton company, Wellex, a Halliburton company. I was designing tools that go down in oil wells and measure bed boundaries, porosity, dip and strike, direction of the hole way down there. All electronics had to run at super high temperatures and heavy pressures. And we went to NASA for some of our transducers. And my boss said, buy what you need. We gotta just make it happen. So I was a production engineer for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What age were you then?
21 to 23, I guess.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So this, you're talking about like early years and then training. And we can come back to some of that, but just continuing with the timeline, like the general timeline for now, what was it that transitioned you from the technical into the ministry formation? And there's, again, like you said, there's overlap there always, but when do you feel like the Lord began to have you concentrate on ministry as ministering with your gifts as opposed to just improving your technical gifts? And maybe that was well down the road at some point.
Well, there were pieces of it. So when I was 14 or 15, don't remember exactly, I was in the backyard reading a popular electronics magazine, and I highlighted a new development to my future brother-in-law sitting beside me that summer evening. He was studying to be a lawyer, and he stared blankly at me, and then he said, "You know what? God's given you a lot of ability." And he walked away.
Because kind of like a few seconds ago, you were saying all these words. I have no idea what they mean with the oil. That's probably what he was thinking.
Well, you would have to know some geology for those terms.
Okay. But he is like, you have some skills and abilities that the Lord has given you.
So he walked away, and that really triggered me to think about, I don't mean triggered in a negative way, I mean in a positive way, to think about what has God given me and what am I going to do with it? Because I saw my dad, and through those eyes of a teenager, working hard. He wanted to put us all through college that he never got to finish. But that's all I saw him do. Work hard, serve a little in church, work hard, wasn't home a lot, did a lot of traveling. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I mean, suppose I can produce a lot. Suppose I am smart. Who am I going to make rich? What's the point? I said, God, I can't preach or teach, but I can give you my talents. I can build things. I can fix things. I want to use them for your kingdom.
Wow.
So that was my mission call moment.
That was when you were 15 or 16?
14 or 15.
14 or 15. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was 16, my parents took me to hear a missionary at another church one Sunday evening from Wycliffe Bible Translators. He was a pilot with JARS. And I asked him, I said, I love mechanics and I love electronics. What should I do? Should I, become a pilot mechanic or what? And he goes, we have plenty of those. We need electronics people. But then he said, I want you to get 2 years experience in the commercial realm before you join a mission.
So that's why you did that.
So that's why I did that. It was good advice.
Wow. Would you give that advice to future aspiring missionaries?
I have already.
Yeah.
And that was, I believe, was important for a formation of a person. It helps in your maturing, but you understand what can be done in a professional way, how things can be organized, how you can produce things and stay to timelines. There's just so many things you learn about technology as well, and about people, and about yourself.
And then, real quick, just to round out the timeline again, how old were you when you went to Colombia?
So we were accepted in Wycliffe in 1982. I would have been 24.
24. Okay, so not long after
And we got to
experience on the
Colombia
job.
when I was almost 26.
Okay.
Right in there.
Okay. And then when did you guys exit South America?
We left summer of 1999
Okay.
on furlough, thinking we might not get to come back.
So 99, what was the first year between
1983.
83
No, well,
to
actually, we
99.
arrived in 1984 until
84
1999.
to 99?
Yeah.
That's a good
That's
chunk of
15
years.
years, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good chunk of years to be living in South America, serving, and then came back. And then what year did you make it to Rio Grande Bible Ministries?
2013.
All right. All right.
Hey, this story is for you and also for others, so share with your friends. My name is Jennifer Rodriguez, I'm from El Salvador, and this is Between Brothers.
All right, so digging in a little bit more. I don't think it would be complete without at least sharing how did you come to know Christ, or when did you know that you knew Christ?
So it happened, I grew up in a Christian home and a very kind of strict, I would call it legalistic, Bible-believing church. And my uncle was the pastor. My dad was one of the three elders. I memorized scriptures from the time I was little. I memorized the Westminster Shorter Catechism. But as I remember it, from the time I was 11 going forward, I started questioning, am I saved? What is the difference? Why do I not know that I'm saved? How do I know that I'm saved? And I'd walk out of church almost like beating my chest going, oh, poor sinner that I am. What am I going to do? I had memorized all these scriptures. I mean, John 3:16 since I was 5 years old or less, you know. I didn't understand how simple it was, but the gospel light hadn't turned on. It hadn't sunk into my heart yet. So God arranged, you know, and I'd look at my sisters, oh yeah, she shows some love and some fruit there. I think she's saved, you know, and I'd look at that person and that person. So it was troubling me. And one Sunday night, and it was a setup. God did it. Normally, the elders all had to sit with their families in the front rows of the church, you know, all in a line, straight and, you know, stiff and straight, and perfectly behaved to be, you know, the examples for the church. But just before church started that Sunday night, somebody needed to get into a classroom and needed a key. My dad had the key. He said, Tom, take the key, run open that classroom, and when you come back, just slip in the back. I was surprised at that, but he didn't want me disturbing anything by slipping in the front. We were very formal. So I slipped in the back. The reason I believe that was important is because all of a sudden I wasn't part of this family elder identity.
That everyone was looking at.
Yeah, that everyone's looking at. I was an independent person sitting in the back. And of course, at that age, you start thinking more independently. So I'm sitting in the back, and for the first time that I can remember, maybe the only time, the pastor gave, at the end of his sermon, an invitation and an explanation of how to be saved. I don't remember him ever doing that. Maybe he had, but I heard it. And all of a sudden, it sunk in, and it was like that weight of guilt and questioning just fell off of me. And I go, you did it for me, Jesus. And I received him.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And then moving forward, so you had your ministry call, as you shared, at 14 or 15. There was like a moment when the Lord kind of put that into your heart that this came from your skill, your ability came from God. Not it wasn't just yours to use on your own. And then a missionary came to your church?
My parents took me because I had shared with them about my mission call. They took me to hear a missionary in town at a different church on a Sunday night. So by now we had moved out of that. That strict church was in California. So we were in Washington State at a whole different church scene. And I would say my parents had relaxed a lot.
Okay. All right. And so they went to another church so you could hear the missionary, and you talked with them in person. Mm-hmm. And that was the advice he gave you.
Yeah.
We need missionaries with electronics, electricians.
He said, we desperately need those people around the world.
Wow. Was he a Wycliffe missionary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went to get experience in the real world with the goal of going to work for Wycliffe afterward. Mm-hmm. And you followed that plan.
Yeah. There was challenges.
All right. Share a little bit of how God got you to the field with Wycliffe.
Yeah. So, you get out of school, you get these big job offers. It's pretty exciting. At least it felt exciting to me. They roll out the red carpet. They want you. This was a company that was building its engineering staff, and we were trying to move up in the market share. And I mean, it was big stuff, an unlimited budget almost.
Wow.
To buy what I needed. I had four tools in production that I was overseeing any engineering changes on. I had 2 labs that...
And this is when you're 21.
I was probably 22.
22.
When I graduated, it was 1980. I would have been 22 when I graduated.
And this was an oil company.
Yeah, it was a Halliburton subsidiary, you could call it. Mm-hmm. And so two labs, several technicians that built circuits for me, tested them. I just draw things up. I say, here, try this. Here, try that. Wow. We need to make this happen. And it was pretty big stuff. And I got jumped way up on the scale of my responsibilities and my pay.
Wow.
And my boss was not a believer, but he was pretty wise. And he said, Tom, you really need to go back and get your master's degree so we can pay you for what you're doing.
Wow. Wow.
So here I am. I'm a year and a half in, and one of these guys in the lab came from one of the automakers. A nice guy. Well, he did drugs on the weekend, but so he was sick Mondays often.
Okay.
But he did neat work, very organized, neat work. And he had a prototype circuit for me that needed to be tested. He needed to finish putting it together, and I was on a strict timeline. So I sat at his bench when he was absent. I finished putting it together, hooked it up, and a little capacitor on the board, a special kind that it's a wet tantalum slug. But anyway, it has sulfuric acid in it, just a tiny component. He had marked the board in reverse. I didn't know because I didn't try to check all his work. When I gave it the power, it exploded.
Wow.
Shot right past my eye, sprayed me with sulfuric acid. Just a tiny bit, but my face felt like a pincushion.
Wow.
And I ran to the bathroom, washed my eyes out, settled things down. And about that time, the boss walked into the lab, and I let him know how unhappy I was about this worker and what had just happened. He called me into his office. I thought we were going to talk about firing him or something. He said, Tom, I bet when you go home at night, you have projects in the garage and you work on those projects. He was right. He named everything that I was doing.
Okay.
He said, your wife is pregnant with your first child. You're going to become a father pretty soon. What are you going to do? You're pretty uptight. You haven't even taken vacation yet.
Huh.
You've been here more than a year and you have not taken vacation.
Wow.
He said, I want you to go talk to your pastor about...
This is your boss?
Yes.
Who is not saved.
Who's not saved. And he says, I want you to talk to your pastor, because he knew I was a Christian, about this situation. I think you need to settle down on this a little bit.
Wow.
And he said, then I want you to plan your vacation. Whoa, I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So I went to my pastor. And I didn't expect him. He was a fairly young guy, and I didn't see he was a very, what do you call it, high IQ kind of guy, academic, really smart. I didn't expect him to be a good counselor. He listened to my story, and he just said, Tom, you're a legalist. I go, I am? He said, yeah. You've set standards for yourself that aren't even in the Bible. And beyond that, you're projecting them on everybody else.
Wow.
And expecting them to obey your standards. So that gave me a lot to think about. Then I got strep throat. I've never had strep throat in my life, ever before or since.
Wow.
I was in bed for a week. I pulled out my file folders of missions from the Laterno University Mission Conference. I always collected materials on all the missions I was interested in. Started going through them and writing letters. We didn't have email back then. And so I wrote letters to different missions and got things going because I remembered my call.
Wow. Because
And
of that.
The Lord just kind of shut me down.
Pause.
So I began to get answers back. And the short end of it is that I had told people originally, told my boss, I'm only here for 2 years. Then I'm going to the mission field.
So you told him from the beginning,
Yeah.
I'm a believer. I'm headed to the mission field. I'm here for 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
At a year and a half or so, I started telling people 3 to 5 years. It was sliding.
Yeah.
Well, funny thing. I got my answers back from different missions. The first one that I'd always wanted to go to, Trans World Radio in Aruba Island, fell through for the second time. I tried to go right out of college, and the whole mission visit didn't work out. So it fell through again, and Terry and I had been praying, and that was a closed door for now, and Wycliffe's was open. The next step was to take a vacation time, go out to the technical center in North Carolina and do a technical evaluation.
With Wycliffe.
With Wycliffe.
Okay. So we're going along the process towards Wycliffe right now, right? Okay. When did you get married in all of this?
Got married when I was almost 21.
Okay.
Just before my last year of college.
Okay. Just
So-
before your last year of college. Did you meet in college? Or
We
where
met
did you meet?
in high school.
In high school. Oh.
When we moved to Washington State, she was a block up the street.
Oh, okay.
We never talked until our senior year.
And then in college, did you stay in communication?
Yeah.
All right.
I went home every major break, long drive. And then she said, I want to share your last year with you. She had gone to Multnomah School of the Bible. Her mom and I conspired to get her out of the house to go to Bible school.
Okay.
So she went for a year in Christian education. Because her dad he cried for her to leave. She was the baby of the family too.
But how did you, so she said, I want to share your last year?
So we got married, and then she was with me my senior year of
So
college.
you guys were already planning on getting married. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of when.
Oh, that's a whole nother story. Yeah. God made that clear before I was even 18.
I don't think I've heard that story.
I mean,
I probably have, but I don't remember it.
let me just quickly finish getting
The Wycliffe part.
Yeah, the
Okay,
Wycliffe.
okay.
Let me just quickly say. So I had told people originally 2 years.
Right. Then you change it to 3 to 5.
Yeah. So then Terry and I prayed. That's my wife. If I'm accepted by Wycliffe and pass the technical test and all that, then we are going to take it from God that that's what he wants us to do. So we did. Here I am. I got to make a decision now. When do I resign? And we felt, no, it's time to resign. I wrote the letter on May 18th, 1982. Little did I realize that was exactly 2 years from the
Wow.
time I started employment there.
Wow.
I checked it later and I go, God
was
held
2
me to
years.
it. God held me to my word.
And that just happened to be the day you
Yeah.
decided, okay, it's
Yeah.
time to write the
It
resignation
was so
letter.
hard to decide, when do I cut off this nice salary?
Yeah.
Because it had increased like over 50% in 2 years.
Wow.
It was a pretty healthy increase. And then
Right.
as soon as I turned in my resignation, a competitive company sent me a job offer for even more money.
Wow.
It was like a test.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did anyway.
Are you firmly convinced and holding to what the Lord was calling
Yeah.
you to?
So now for getting married, I don't know how we're going to fit all the stories in, man. My life is different than a lot of people's. So Terry and I, the way we met was November of our senior year. Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place story came out on movie
Okay.
way back.
I saw it as a kid, but
1975, I think,
Oh, okay. Wow.
was the year, something like that. And I went with my parents. It was a Sunday afternoon in a downtown old theater, kind of cool old place. She went with her parents. apparently we both sat up in the balcony. And on the way out, she was just ahead of me on the stairs going down. And I was thinking, I've seen that girl. I know that girl. I think she's the one that lives up the street. What's her name? What's her name? I was not outgoing, but it was somebody I recognized. And I thought, oh, Terry, I think her name's Terry. So I said it kind of sheepishly or kind of quietly. I said, hi, Terry. She turned around and looked, and she goes, hi. She didn't know who I was. But she had study hall right across from my history class, right across the hallway. And the teacher left the door open. So I always sat in that front corner by the door. And then we could start, waving at each other. And then the semester changed, and we were able to get our lunches together. And she dropped interesting little comments about, you'd really like my brother-in-law because he was a physicist and nuclear engineer. And so anyway, there's a whole nother piece of it that God used her in, but she helped me get over some areas of my life where I would get down on myself a lot. She would kind of get mad at me and tell me it's not the truth. Nobody had ever told me that before.
Wow. I was kind of feeling like whenever you went to your pastor and he said you're a legalist, you're putting it on yourself and on others, it makes me wonder that, like, Terry had to be the right person from God to be by your side as you grew through those years.
To move me out of it a little more. So then what happened was in the spring, we kind of hung out. My dad had rules, for all the way down, all 8 of us, couldn't get your license till you're 18 years old and can pay for your own car. You can't go on dates one-on-one, not allowed. Has to be group and not until after you're out of high school. So, all this stuff. Because he got married young. He was not out of high school. He practically was still a kid when he got married at 17. Oh, I guess he got engaged at 16 or 17.
Wow.
So he didn't want us doing that. And so we had to be very strategic. So I would go to her house, in the afternoons once in a while or the evening. As long as it was at her house, it was okay. Well, Athletes in Action was coming to town. They were going to do a Friday evening event at our high school. And I invited her to join me there. Let's rendezvous there. And she made this excuse that, oh, my sister and husband are coming up from California tomorrow, and I got to help clean house. And, well, okay. It sounded a little lame to me, but I didn't know why she wouldn't want to come see me. So I went. I found some of the kids from our youth group, which was a different church than hers. And afterwards, and I sat with them. Afterwards, their car wouldn't start. And so I said, oh, you know what? It sounds like you got a bad battery connection. I fixed it. And then the door flew open and they pushed a girl out the door to kiss me because somebody inside the car, one of the girls had said, I'll kiss whoever gets this car started. So they made her kiss me. And so I was telling Terry about this on the phone the next night, kind of joking about it. Well, that's not something to joke about. I didn't know better. I never had a girlfriend before that was serious. And I wouldn't say Terry and I were serious. So she got quiet and she said, who am I to you? And I go, well, I'm your good friend and I'd like to get to know you better, but I got to go to college and I'm planning to go to the mission field. And she goes, okay, I want to know, how serious are you about going to the mission field?
Wow.
And I go, I'm very serious about it. I feel called to it. And she goes, okay, then I'm going to tell you something. Last summer, I committed my life to becoming the wife of a pastor or missionary. I'm supposed to be in full-time ministry with my husband.
Wow.
And I don't want to pursue this relationship any further if you're not serious.
Wow. She just laid it out.
She did. And for being a fairly, private person, she sure put it out there. But here's the real kicker. I had dreamt she told me that the night before.
Wow.
And that was a sobering moment. When she told me that, I go, whoa, I just dreamt that last night. I think God is in this. I think we better be very careful. So that was that was the beginning of a very careful, serious relationship.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And that started pretty early. You guys were that was in your plans as you're moving forward.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So back to the part of the story where now you're together and you've committed that if you're accepted through Wycliffe, that's the sign that by Wycliffe, that's the sign you're supposed to move forward, right? And it was a year or so later that you ended up.
So I resigned in 1982, quit my job. We went immediately, after being accepted, immediately to what they called SIL, Summer Institute of Linguistics. It was linguistic training. That was their only candidate school at that time. So you go to a summer school where they orient you on Wycliffe and linguistics and what they do. And this one was at the University of Oklahoma. We actually got 9 credit hours. I mean, these are real college classes. Here we are in a dorm room in separate iron cots with a crib with our little 4-month-old, first baby, separate bathrooms down the hall, and trying to go to school. And she's nursing. And so she had to run to daycare every, hour or two because that kid had a voracious appetite. And that was high pressure. And they didn't want us in the same classes. So we had to take separate classes.
Why?
Because they didn't want husbands and wives relying on each other. They wanted to see how we each were and how we learned. And
interesting. But you weren't going for Bible translation.
No, but they sure tried to talk me into it.
Really?
That was the only way they had their first candidate school.
Okay. Were you going through JARS?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
what's that? Jungle Aviation?
It used to be known as Jungle Aviation and Radio Service. They were the technical arm of Wycliffe, Bible translators.
Right.
And so this was, if you're going to JARS, then you become a member of Wycliffe, not a member of JARS.
Okay.
You're a member of Wycliffe. And the international organization was called Summer Institute of Linguistics,
right?
SIL. So, so we got introduction to linguistics, introduction to language learning, cross-cultural courses, a lot of stuff like that.
Okay. All right. We're going to dive into Colombia now, South America.
Okay.
15 years that you guys were serving in Colombia. And were any of your kids born there?
All 3. No, not all 3, but the last 3.
Okay. So you had 4 kids.
We have 4
total.
kids, so 3 were born there.
Wow. Do they have dual citizenship?
They did, but I believe at 18 they had to declare one or the other.
Interesting. What were the main... was your ministry for the 15 years the same the whole time, your basic role? What were the different roles or ministries that you filled during those 15 years?
So I came in as electronic support, I guess you could call it. They called it radio, but we didn't have broadcast like here. It was two-way communications, avionics, computer repair, audio equipment. I mean, the linguists all they used tape recorders back then. They had the first desktop computers in the 80s, and eventually the first lunchbox computers they could take out. And I helped them with power supplies and eventually solar.
So you were assisting more the missionaries that
Yeah,
were
we
there.
were considered support personnel.
Right, for the translators.
Right.
Okay.
We had translators involved in 45 different languages, indigenous languages.
Wow.
And most of these people groups did not speak hardly a word of Spanish back then.
Okay, so that was your first one role?
Yeah, I did that for 11 years, but things are never like you think they're going to be. So just backing up just a little bit. So now I remember, after candidate school, University of Oklahoma, SIL, that's when we got accepted. So it would have been August 1982. We were accepted as full members. We had to raise support and go to language school and get technical orientation.
Spanish language school.
Spanish language school.
Where did you go for that?
So we went to Costa Rica.
All right.
So we raised support 82, 83, went to technical orientation in 83, and then on to Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica school in the end of 83. And we're there 10 months.
Okay.
And finally got our visas worked out and arrived in Colombia in fall. Well, it would have been about October 1984.
What kind of visas did you guys have to get?
We finally entered, because it was tough. Visas are always tough in another country. Multiple entry tourist visas is what we started with. It's the only thing they could get us. So we had to go out to Venezuela one time. We had to go to Quito, Ecuador another time. Finally, we got our resident visa.
Okay. And what was the technical school through Wycliffe? Technical orientation?
Yeah, that was JARS. Yeah, that was out in North Carolina.
All right. And then, so your first role, radio engineer.
So for 11 years. But, so I called the guy in charge of the radio department in Colombia when he was up for a son's wedding. And I said, hey, we've been assigned to Colombia, to the radio department. What do I need to know? What do I need to bring? And his first words, talk about a balloon popper. Oh, I didn't know we needed anybody. I had requested, tell me the countries, the 5 most urgent needs in the world for my type of person. And Colombia was one of them, which is the one I said, I don't want to go there. Unless God really makes it clear.
Okay.
Which he did.
How did he end up making it Colombia?
So while we were at technical orientation, you work with personnel on your assignment. It's just 3 months long. First of all, I was the only orientee in my area that year. And so the head of that orientation said, here, Tom, we can just kind of quickly plan it out. 2 weeks in two-way communications, 2 weeks in business machines. Back then, you still had typewriters. 2 weeks in, computers, 2 weeks in avionics. And he said, here, I'll just write down the dates because we're tailor-making this for you. Nobody else is in it.
Okay.
Well, it so happens that the 2 weeks in avionics, the Columbia DC-3 airplane was up for an engine change. And they told me, as I was in the avionics course, he said, look, you've learned everything I need to teach you in the first week. We don't need a second week. I've got to go on a trip. If you want to help work on the DC-3, there's 3 persistent problems nobody's been able to solve in the avionics. But you don't have to. Don't worry about it. Well, I like challenges. So I decided to make myself available to get on that DC-3. I mean, imagine an old warbird that's been refurbished. It's beautiful and shiny, and I've never been on such an airplane. So I'm on that thing, and they tell me what their problems are. And the first one is I'm trying to work on a connector and a device behind the instrument panel. And I knew a little bit about spiritual warfare, and I knew there was a lot of issues in Colombia. I don't really know. I didn't have a lot of experience, but I was getting frustrated. I could not get a connector together no matter what I did. And it's just the Lord, I guess, just stop. And I prayed and I said, in the name of Jesus, you fit together. Came right together. And at the end of the first day, I solved the first problem. So I prayed that night for the second problem. At the end of the second day, I solved the second problem. I prayed again. This is the spiritual side coming back in, even early on. Third problem solved the third day. I'm afraid that, impressed the crew that came up with the plane.
From Colombia.
From Colombia. And so, of course, they gave me a check ride. That was a blast. Driving around the air in that airplane. Those huge old radial engines. Anyway, so I brought Terry out to take pictures of the plane that evening before there was a night or two before they were going to take off and head back to Colombia. And they were refueling it. The chief pilot was on the wing refueling it. And I was shooting pictures, and he says, Tom, you really need to think about Colombia. Of course, he laid it on thick. I mean, he really gave me a good reason to think about going to Colombia. Well, we had just put out a prayer letter that said, please pray for us. 5 urgent needs. Colombia is one of them. I didn't specify it separately. I just listed the
5 places.
The 5 different countries. I said, please pray that God will make it clear. And so here we are talking to this guy, and I'm going, no, 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 no. And then I remembered the letter. I go, all right, why don't you come to dinner? Just come over to our house for dinner. So he came to dinner, and by the end of the evening, he had shared more reasons. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's hitting my emotions, but he shared good reasons for us to consider Colombia and not some of the others. But I had already sent the word out to Indonesia that we'd like to meet with them and consider going to Indonesia. So Terry and I sat on the edge of the bed that night and said, okay, Lord, if you really want us to consider Colombia and not Indonesia, then have the appointment I have with the director who happens to be here right now from Indonesia, have him cancel the appointment that I have on Monday. This was a Saturday evening. So Sunday evening, we had a service on the campus there for JARS, and the director of Indonesia and his wife were right in front of me. So at the end, I said, are we on for tomorrow? Does the date still look good? And he goes, oh, Tom, I've got another appointment. I don't think I can. He said, how about lunch this time? I go, yeah, sure. And his wife goes, no, honey, you've got something else you've got to do. He goes, oh, man, I'm out of time. He said, Tom, I'm sorry. I don't think we can meet.
Wow.
I go,
wow.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, okay. So now back to you talk to the main radio person or someone?
The guy in charge of that department in Colombia.
In Colombia, and says, sorry, we didn't know we needed someone, even though
it was on the urgent list.
Even though it had been presented to you, obviously with well thought out reasons for why they needed people. Okay, so I want to cover a little bit like what you did functionally. What was your ministry role in Colombia? But then I also want to ask you, I want to transition into what did God teach you about spiritual warfare in Colombia? Because from what you've shared in your growing up years, and then what I know of you as my pastor elder at church, that's something that the Lord has taught you and has you your eyes open to. So, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with Colombia as well. So anyway, so let's wrap up. Okay, there were 4 more years there, and you don't have to rush through it or anything, but I want to get to the not just technical side of what happened.
So let me, just because I think there's good lessons in it, let me just share from that point where that guy
he
said what he did.
He popped the balloon.
Popped the balloon is like,
you're not the greatest person, the most
needed person there after all. And it's like, but God called us there. This is what we did. We wrote down everything that God had done as it happened. And I'm so glad we did, because we could pull that sheet of paper out. I still have it from 1982, 83.
Wow.
On how God directed us. It's important to stand by what God shows you, even if somebody says, well, I didn't think we really needed you. Because we got there finally in 84, and within 3 months, I think it was, no more than 5 months of being there and getting a little orientation, I was it. Everybody was gone.
Like, how many people are we talking about?
There was the director, that guy, 4 others.
They were all gone.
They were all gone.
Okay.
Furloughs and emergencies and unforeseen things.
Wow.
God knows. He knew I needed to get there.
Right.
And get oriented.
Right.
And the funny thing, okay, just a quick comment.
So for Colombia, we're talking about Wycliffe, Colombia.
Wycliffe, Colombia.
The country.
The country. The mission there. One more quick comment about preparation. So I get there, and they put me on the bench and say, here's a cassette tape recorder. Can you fix it? Well, that's really hard, because I came from designing this fancy equipment with $20,000 transducers from NASA that went down in oil wells 5 miles and endured 200 degrees centigrade temperatures and huge pressures.
So you're not saying technically it was hard.
It was on my ego.
Yes, yes.
I had to bite my pride, swallow my pride, and do what I was told. And not long after, in fact, it was Christmas time, they start bringing their audio equipment to you because missionaries like to hear their Christmas music, and sometimes they fail. And you're in this humid climate with no air conditioning, and your electronics likes to fail. And they brought this amplifier in, audio amplifier in, and they said, hey, Tom, we just need to get some transistors for this. It always fails. Every year we have to replace those. And I looked at the schematic. We actually had plans, schematics on them. And I go, well, I know why it failed, because it's not a good design. Oh, no, this is a Pioneer amplifier. It's a good design. I said, no, it's not. I said, that's the wrong way to do things. Oh, no, they know what they're doing. I said, no, I know how it is. In industry, you've got to get things out the door, and they don't let you fix it all the time. And so then forever on, you got lemons out there, bad designs. Let me change a couple components in here, and it won't ever fail again. They said, okay. And I did, and it never failed again. That's where the training on the job in commercial side, I think, really helpful.
Okay.
I could bring another perspective. You can't just assume everything is done right the first time when it's gotten on the market. And you can understand the principles of how to do things. So anyway, just a comment that was interesting that I brought. And I brought other design mentality to the field where I could say, oh, just because you can't find it in the catalogs doesn't mean we can't do it. But build one. So I built the first battery supplies for computers, so they could take their lunchbox computers out to the jungle. Those kind of things I was able to do for them that the other guys didn't have experience in. So anyway, we get to where I'm on my own, and it's like everything's falling apart, and I was going crazy, very stressed, and I had to learn. I'd had one other lesson at 18 years old that taught me, Tom, you do stupid stuff when you get too stressed. Calm down. So I had to talk myself down a lot. But anyway, so yes, for 11 years, I was in and out of being the director of the radio department, sometimes doing bench work, but an awful lot of the time I was just leading the team. And God did eventually bring some back, but some of them never came back. 2 of them never came back. And then one did eventually come back, and the other, we got a short-term missionary that became a member and stayed.
So when you give me just a couple real quick practical things. So you're talking about fixing amplifiers and cassettes, were you, when you say radio team, is that just anything Wycliffe needs fixed electronically, or did you have specific things you're responsible for?
Yeah, there were priorities. So every linguistic team that went out to the jungle had to take a 2-way radio with them that would communicate back to base, which was us.
Oh, okay.
So we had to maintain the base station and even man it on the weekends. So we took turns being on the air and doing the check-in with all our linguistic people all over the country every morning. Because of the terrorists and everything that was out there.
You were the ones in connection with the people going into the jungles, the mountains, or wherever, and when things happened, they needed to communicate back to base.
Right. And furthermore, our aircraft were flying territory that only we mapped. There were no charts for it. And so they had checkpoints they had established. We had the maps. And tower operator, we had our own tower operator. And on the weekends, we did it. We did the flight following.
You were the ones that knew where the planes were at, what was happening.
And we had to have
if
the
an
radio
emergency
on.
happened. Wow. Okay, I'm thankful that you explained that part, because I was still on like radio stations or evangelism, but no, this is the Wycliffe missionary communication, the translator communication going on.
And the aircraft communication.
I recently read a book, Lords of the Earth, about, and that's over in Indonesia, but that communication that those missionaries out there by themselves, 1 or 2 families, was super important. Do you know of any stories that have been written about Colombia Any missionary stories that
There
you know
are
of?
some, and one of our pilots just published a book.
Oh.
I don't remember the name of it offhand, but he was jungle pilot. It may go by that title. George Dave Ocala is the name of the pilot. He was a interesting guy.
Dave?
George Dave Ocala, Devoucala, I think. I'd have to see it written.
Okay.
Dave Ocala.
Dave Ocala. I'm going to have to get it from you after.
I've got the book in my
nice.
at home.
Okay.
That's one book that's been written. Guerrilla Hostage is another book that was written about Ray Rising's capture and being held for 2 years. I know there's some others. Of course, there's some that weren't Wycliffe missionaries. The New Tribes.
Those two were both Wycliffe stories?
Yeah, those were ours.
Oh, wow.
In Colombia. And then what's the name of it? The pilot, and I was on the radio with him and with our guys trying to rescue him, a New Tribes pilot who was captured by the guerrillas as well, the terrorists, and he escaped. That was a crazy time. I kept a recording of all the interaction on radio for the longest time. I still might have it.
So you were on the radio with him
when he escaped.
Wow.
I was on the radio with our pilots trying to find him in the jungle.
Wow.
And went to his villages and saw what was going on, saw one of the captees, and when our airplane did a low pass, he held his hand to his throat as he waved the white handkerchief and he shifted. He was trying to give us a message. The white handkerchief was their New Tribe symbol that everything was fine to land. And we found out later there were guerrillas in the weeds behind him with a gun on him, and he was supposed to get our plane to land. But our guy was an ex-highway patrol and pilot, and he saw that, and he goes, I think we just got him in trouble. I think we better get out of here fast.
Wow. The guerrillas were trying to get the plane to land.
Yeah. So they get another plane.
And you were
I was on the radio with him.
Wow.
So I recorded all that, and then all of a sudden I get a call like 6 a.m. A few days later. Tom, get on. Paul Dye escaped and he's been shot. Paul Dye was the name of their pilot.
Wow.
And I got on, and he wasn't shot. He said, I'm shot.
Oh.
Meaning I'm tired.
Yeah.
He had escaped, and it's a cool story.
Is there, and you say that's written down too?
Yes, there's a book on that one too. I don't remember the name of it, but I've got it.
All right. I want them. That would be awesome. Because, I mean, it really makes it come alive, the work that's going on.
I live those stories.
Like sitting here talking with you, it's like, oh yeah, missions in Colombia. But those, I feel like the more you read them, the more you realize these were real people just like us living through this, trying to survive, and the Lord was using them.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have a whole lot more time for this episode. Maybe again we'll have a follow-up, but I want to ask, how did the Lord you mentioned spiritual formation. What did the Lord do in your spiritual formation? You can include all whenever you want, but specifically in Colombia, and maybe a story that you remember that helps exemplify, what the Lord was teaching, what the Lord has taught you over the years.
So, just to fill in those other 4 years, I was asked after Ray Rising had been kidnapped in 1992, I believe, 1993. We were home on furlough. He was kidnapped while we were away. I worked with him in radio. And so everything was put on hold. Then I was asked to return if we were willing. But we had to sign a waiver that we understood that we or any family member could be kidnapped, killed, maimed. We had to sign this waiver.
Wow.
I don't know if it would have held up in a court of law. And so, it really made us think. And there's a lot of interesting miracle stories of how God confirmed us going back. But that was a real test. Do we trust God?
And that was going back for the last 4 years?
For the next, I guess it would have been the last 5 years. It was a tough 5 years.
Wow.
So we went back to the field after a year furlough, 93, 94. So we went back in 94. And as soon as I got back, everything was different. I mean, they'd put personnel on hold. We were one of the few they called back if we were willing to come. They asked me to be director of all the operations.
Oh, okay. For Colombia.
For Colombia mission, yeah. That's, okay, so there's some testing there, but there was some miracles God did. So I probably need to back up just during that furlough. God did some miracles that shaped us. Probably the first one was his ability to supply and even answer the smallest requests that we think should be insignificant to God. So every December, I don't know how it's been for you, but for us during that time, and especially during that time, our income was not steady. It wasn't a steady salary. It was whatever comes in, and you're supposed to be within this certain range, is what you get deposited in the bank. I mean, less their 10% and taxes and that kind of thing. So your income kind of went like this every month, and December's was always lower. People are buying Christmas and doing things, I guess. And so people give less donations until maybe the end of the year, which wasn't as big a thing back then, it didn't seem like, for us anyway. So we were hoping, because toys and things in Colombia were pretty cheesy at that time, we wanted to get something good for each child. And so we actually had them, in anticipation of Christmas, write down. We walked through the stores. I mean, we were so intentional. It's crazy. Walked through the stores, said, pick out the thing specifically that is your top choice of what you want. Within, I think we were willing to spend, maybe $35. It was $50 a child is what we were going to spend. And back in the 90s, that was pretty significant. But we wanted to take something back that was reasonable quality that would be good. So we gave them each a budget, and they each picked out their first and second, third choices. We wrote them down. We weren't going to mess around because, we hadn't been home. At this time in their life, they were ages about 3 through 12 years old. And so, or 4 through 12. But anyway, so we get our statement for December, and it's lower than we hoped. Way lower. We barely had enough to pay the bills. We're living in this little 100-year-old farmhouse, no insulation in it, out in a farm. It was cheap. It was somebody from a supporting church farm. He was my Sunday school teacher, in fact, in high school. And so it was a nice situation as far as that goes, in the middle of an orchard. But it was cold. We were getting sick a lot. We weren't used to cold weather. Sorry, this is a lot of story again. But so coming up to Christmas, I said, Terry, you better go shopping. Get what you can. Oh, I know. First I went to a men's meeting at the church we were attending. Soon after I got the news of my deposit in the bank. And I get there, and they're talking about money, and one of the guys says, hey, Tom, you probably have some good stories about money and how God provides. And I go, I'm not feeling real good about it right now. So I explained it to them, and they go, one of the other guys says, you just need to have your kids engaged in this. Tell them to pray for how God wants to provide Christmas. Have them ask God how he wants to provide. And I'm going, that doesn't seem right. You just, God, does he care about materialistic things, at Christmas? Kind of gets your legalistic mind going. And so, but I did. I said, kids, what we want to spend, that would mean we need $300. We don't have it to spend. Let's ask God what he wants to do about it. And they were very happy to pray about it. Well, within a week, a check came from a ladies group in Houston from a former church of ours, and they sent $300. So that was cool. Kids got to see that answer to prayer, and us too. Well, then, a week before Christmas, we're all getting sick, except Terry. And so I said, Terry, before you get sick, get out there and shop and get the stuff. And she was gone a lot of the day. She came back with a few things. She said all of their number one picks are sold out. She could not. She went to every store she could find, and she could not get them, and she was bummed out. So we go, well, okay, we'll make the best of it. We'll just fill in with some other things. We went to Christmas Eve service at our church. When we came back, here was a box full of gifts wrapped on the doorstep. And each one said to each of our children by name, "From Jesus Helper." When they opened those on Christmas morning, they got exactly their number one pick. And nobody else knew our list. Nobody in the family even had the list. We don't know who it was. They were led by the Spirit. That's the only thing I can say. It impacted our kids and us. So that began just building faith. Then when we were asked to return to Colombia, please pray through it, see if you agree. Well, even my dad, who was a trust and obey, you just go, kind of person, he goes, man, if I had a little Jessica like yours, I'd think twice. I mean, she was a little cutie.
Wow. How old was she at that point?
She would have been kindergarten, probably 5.
Wow.
5 or 6. She was a little cutie. And she had, gotten to know the grandparents quite well because they both lived in town at that time where we were. So, that was hard. And then we're praying about it. I called a travel service and I said, we need to know what it's going to cost us. And so they were going to work on the flights and everything. I didn't hear back from them for a couple of weeks. That was kind of strange. And trying to think how it happened, but I put it to the men's group again. On a Monday night, I drove the motorcycle that somebody had given me to church for the men's group Monday night. And on the way back, I needed to stop by the grocery store and get a couple things. When I stopped, it was a late night. They prayed over me for almost an hour. It was amazing. They gathered around me at the end of the meeting and prayed over us for a clear decision. I get to the grocery store, and it's an empty parking lot, pretty dark, but it's open. And there's this 20-something-year-old kid drinking a Coke just outside the entry door with a backpack on. Don't think anything of it. When I came out, he's standing by my motorcycle in the empty parking lot. Kind of made me hesitate. And he could tell. So I kind of stayed on the back side of the motorcycle. He was on the front, and I'm strapping things on. And he said, "Don't worry. I just want to talk to you about safety." I thought, well, this is odd. God, what do you want with this guy? What do I say to him? What are you doing? And he goes, well, he's stumbling around about safety and driving a motorcycle. And I go, well, you know what? We've been living in Colombia, South America, and helmets are illegal in Colombia because it hides your identity, and assassins wear helmets. I said, so, you can't always depend on a helmet to keep you safe. We just have to depend on God. I was trying to figure out how to bring God into this. And he goes, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He said, when you pulled in the parking lot, the Lord told me that you are afraid. And you're afraid of your well-being. You're feeling insecure. And he wants you to know that you need to obey. You need to trust him, obey. And he started quoting out of, I think it's 2 Corinthians 7. He said, what I mean, brothers, is the time is short. Those who have homes should act as if they don't. Those who have wives as if they don't. This world and everything in it's passing away. I said, Tom, you need to obey and get back to Colombia then.
Wow.
So, this kid out of the blue is telling me in this empty parking lot that I need to get back to Colombia right after we had an hour of prayer asking God about it. So I said, what's your name? And he goes, Michael. I don't know. I went home. Terry was almost asleep. I woke her up. We prayed, God, if this is really you, then I'm going to call Agape Travel Service tomorrow and I'll find out what happened. And if they say that, this is, again, God, I don't know how else he put the idea in my head to pray. If they tell us that they have a super saver and we have to make a decision right away tomorrow, then we'll know we're supposed to go. I just put another fleece out there. Some people don't like that, but God's been okay with it. So that was the fleece we put out. I was nervous calling them in the morning. I called them up and they go, let me see. Oh, well, we've been waiting for an answer from you. I said, well, I've never heard from you. Oh, well, we have a super saver for you. And it's like almost half off. And we've got to know by 5 o'clock tonight. Can you make a decision that quick? And I go, yeah, I can. We're going.
Wow.
So that got us back in the very tense time in the Colombia mission history.
Right. And I know you've shared a little bit before that those next few years were very hard on your family, stressful for your family. For now, I think we need to pause, and we haven't, I think we better say, for the sake of the audience, that you're here at Rio Grande Bible Ministries as the director of media, radio engineer, all the ministry that we haven't even gotten to as far as what you're doing now. And I think that's going to have to be part of part B.
Yeah, we can talk about spiritual warfare and how that hit us and we began to learn that. And even if you want, how God directed us here, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
But for now, I'm excited about those stories. I want to find out. I want to read those books. But thank you, Tom, for sharing at least this part of your story.
All right.
This podcast is a part of Rio Grande Bible Ministries. If you want to learn more about the Bible College that's in Spanish, the language school to learn Spanish, the radio station, or Bibleville, or any of the other ministries of Rio Grande, find us at riogrande.edu. That's our website, riogrande.edu. And if you want to interact with the podcast, if you want to ask questions, give us feedback, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, searching for Entre Hermanos. Make sure to add Rio Grande to your search, and we will be the first ones to show up. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Entre Hermanos, which means Between Brothers.